Hello, friends. This is Peter Herbeck. I hope you're at peace in Christ. Well, I want to welcome those of you who regularly come to the YouTube channel. I want to welcome you back. Those who are here for the first time, glad you're here. Before I kind of reflect on the theme for today, I want to just say a few things about what it is that we're doing at Renewal Ministries. So Renewal Ministries is focused on the promotion of Catholic renewal and evangelization here in the United States and all around the world. We do that in a variety of ways. We have a television show that's been going on for almost 40 years now called The Choices We Face. You could get that on our website at renewalministries.net. I do a daily radio program, 15 minutes long, called Fire on the Earth. So some of the themes that I take up on these YouTube videos, I expand on sometimes on the radio show. Also, one of our team members, Sister Ann Shields, does a very popular radio show called Food for the Journey. We're also working all around the world with the church bishops, priests, and lay people on the ground, promoting the new evangelization and really the work of the Spirit in this hour in the church. We're working, this year we'll probably do over 30 international missions in about 25 different countries around the world. And we've been doing that for a good number of years. And so if you want to know more about what we're doing, you can go to our website at renewalministries.net. Everything we do is right there on our website. If you like what we're doing and you want to support us, there's an opportunity, there's a donate button there. You can donate and support the work that we're doing both domestically and around the world. If you like these YouTube videos we're doing, hit the subscribe button. We want to just keep growing this channel. But today what I want to talk about is the growth, the continued steady growth of the culture of death. I mean, it's not a very happy topic, but it's a reality of what's happening. Just this last week, I read a few articles. Well, first of all, let me back up. I mentioned a week or two ago that here in the state of Michigan, our election is next week. And there's a proposal, it's called Proposal 3. It's a very, very aggressive pro-abortion proposal. And there's a lot of deception around it. And it kind of staggers the mind when you think about the degree of deception that can come around these things. And you see, I think, the work of the enemy. It's part of the spiritual battle. And part of the deception is saying, just trying to retrieve what was lost in Roe versus Wade. Well, in our state, there were a lot of good regulations that were sensible, limited abortion as much as we were able to get to have happen. But now what they're pushing for is to be able to abort a child right up to the first breath, to remove all parental consent on minors and things like that. So it's a very aggressive, they're going for everything on this particular bill. And they want to get into the Constitution, actually, so that it can't be tinkered with after this. So pray for us. But I just thought to myself, such an aggressive drive, and so many people acting as if this is going to defend their freedom. It's going to defend their power. It's going to defend their capacity to find happiness on the earth, to have absolute control. And it's control over life and death. And there's a blindness there, and there's a spiritual reality that's unfolding in many ways in the culture. I want to look at a couple other battles around different parts of the world. In France, just this last week, I read this article. This month, 150 randomly chosen French citizens will debate whether or not to adopt legislation that will legalize assisted dying as part of President Emmanuel Macron's plan to move forward on proposals to legalize assisted suicide. The citizens panel will take part in a 6-month debate over whether to allow legal euthanasia and assisted suicide. Polling shows that 93% of French citizens support establishing a right to die in the country. It's worth asking the question, why? Why is there such an aggressive push and such an intense focus in the first world or the free world, whatever you want to call it, such a focus on the capacity and the power and the right to kill? In Ottawa, the Quebec College of Physicians is being slammed by advocacy groups for suggesting that it be legal to euthanize severely ill newborns. Dr. Louis Roy from the Quebec College of Physicians told the Commons Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying on Friday that his organization believes that this medical assistance in dying can be appropriate for infants up to age 1 who are born with severe malformation and grave and severe syndromes for which their perspectives of survival is null, so to speak. So this committee of intellectuals, of doctors, is now going beyond the defense of abortion, right? Now they're going to promote essentially infanticide. This is one of the people who responded to it said this, assisted death or suicide isn't even the right word for what's being described here in this case. A baby cannot consent. A baby cannot decide they want to end their own life. It's not about my kind of choice or autonomy. This is straight up infanticide. So on both ends of life, this is being promoted as compassion. This is being promoted as a way for freedom, the full exercise of rights. And this is just, we're such good people, we're going to do what? We're such good people, we're going to kill those and assist those who want to die, to kill little children who have born with handicaps. So we know this has been growing, but it's more bold now than it's ever been. And this is governments that once lived with a biblical worldview, not like they were all radically Christian, but basically respected the reality of God, the things of God, and these kinds of areas the governments didn't want to step across. Why? Because they were mostly historically Christian. But here's the main point that I want to make. This probably isn't completely news to you, what I've been reading. I mean, it's grim, it's sad, but it's spiritual combat, and it's worth asking the question, why is this happening? Why are people, intelligent people, why are they so focused on this? And why are they so aggressive on pushing it? Why are so many people in these countries agreeing with it and wanting to promote it? What's going on? Well, there's a deeper, you could say that politics is downstream from culture. Culture is the way of life of a people and what they value. And our values are changing and a different culture is emerging. No longer a Christian culture. What's emerging is an element of what is emerging is a culture that values the marginalization of a Judeo-Christian worldview, even the suppression of it. And what's emerging is what St. John Paul II and recent popes and leaders Christian leaders across the world called a culture of death. And it's a culture, it's a set of values that basically death itself becomes a solution to a culture and a civilization and a political community's most intractable problems. How do we solve problems like children who are born with severe defects? Because it requires money, it requires sacrifice, it requires suffering to love and live with the suffering the way Christ calls us to. Now it's all about utility. And it's really about what's going to make us happy. But we have a nice mask. We have a nice, set of arguments that this is compassion, these kinds of things, and assisting the death of old people. When, of course, a culture that's totally focused on utility and on what I get out of life, and to be able to make sure I get all my happiness as I define it on this life, and nothing should stand in the way of that for me. You send that message out enough, older people hear it. And what do they think? When they get to a certain age and they're no longer productive, and in some way they feel like they're a burden to you, or a burden to me, what are they going to do? Of course they're going to say, deep down inside, I'm not really wanted. I have no purpose. This is the nature of the kind of culture that's emerging. And underneath it, as I say, politics is downstream from this culture, but it's religion, it's worldview that informs culture. And the worldview is changing. That's why the culture is changing. And the worldview that's changing is a worldview that no longer looks to God. It no longer obeys the commandments of God. It no longer believes in the existence of God. Or even if it does, it doesn't want to pay attention to the reality of the existence of God and his claim on our life. And so the suppression of truth, the kind of thing that's described in Romans 1 that we've talked about many times on this YouTube channel, or Psalm 2, where it says this, a very prophetic psalm, it'd be worth reading for you to meditate on. At the beginning, the first stanza of that psalm, the kings of the earth, the powerful, set themselves against the Lord and his anointed. This is the constant temptation in human history. And it's going to reach its peak in the final battle before the Lord returns, in the rise of the Antichrist. But the kings of the earth set themselves against the Lord, saying, let's throw off his commandments. These commandments are like chains around us. They bind us from being free. Let's throw off their chains, right? That's what's happening in the culture. It's the pride of mind. It's a spiritual battle. If you've been able to listen to the YouTubes over the last few years, I've talked about Romans chapter 1, such a prophetic word for our time, the suppression of the truth of God, refusing to acknowledge God and refusing to give him thanks. Human beings are willfully turning in the pride of mind, turning away from the humility of recognizing a creator and giving to God what belongs to God. And we ourselves now are becoming God. And in that passage, it talks about, in the empty futility of a darkened mind is what emerges in the lives of people who turn away from the source of their own origin, right? The source of their life, the source and ground of truth itself. God who is true, God who is light. So human beings turn away from the light, whether they're consciously saying it or not, but they're saying, I need to turn away because if anybody has a claim on my life, commandments, rules, whatever, it inhibits my freedom and my capacity to be the authentic, self-creative origin of who I want to be and defining reality on my own terms. So God needs to be pushed away. When that happens with human beings, there's no middle safe way to live. There's two realities, two kingdoms, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. The light of Jesus Christ is the light that shone in the darkness, right? And the darkness would not overcome it, could not overcome it. What is that darkness? The reign of sin and death. The demonic powers of the world of flesh and the devil. These are the realities. And in a culture that's inhabited by a people who understand that and are living with respect for God and the things of God, they're protected. There's a protection there, right? And because also there's the light of truth, because people are walking in sanity. They're not living as if the creator of all things, the designer, doesn't exist. And I myself, even though I can't explain how I got here, that somehow I'm designing a meaningful existence for my life. Doesn't make any sense. It's a darkened mind. It's the futility of a darkened mind. And Paul says in Romans 1, their senseless minds became darkened. Reminds me of a passage from Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14. It reads like this. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same nature. That is, we are flesh and blood. So Jesus took on our nature, flesh and blood nature, to die for us. And he says that through death he might destroy him who has the power of death. So death is a power. It's wielded by Satan. For those who are not in Christ, walking in the light or living in the truth, death is a dominion. It has power, and it has power to enslave. The reading goes on. He said, let me just read that last line again, that through death he might destroy him who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those through who fear of death were subject to lifelong bondage. That's one way of describing what Jesus did. He came to deliver the human race from being subject to lifelong bondage to the powers of sin and death, to the reign of death. All people die. All people, before the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, humanity's destiny was eternal death. But Jesus came and disarmed those powers. Right? And when we live under the lordship of Christ, when we walk in the commandments of God, even when people follow it with right reason, the natural law of God, there's protection there. One great saint I talked about a number of months ago, Saint Bernardino of Siena, gave a homily talking about the judgments of God in history. And he says when peoples, nations, insist on suppressing the truth about God, turning away from his commands, God will, with time and again, he'll reach out with mercy to try to win them back, to awaken them, to turn toward the light for the sake of their salvation, because God wants us to be saved. But human beings have a free will, and if we keep doubling down on sin, saying yes to darkness, God has to act in a different way. And what Romans 1 talks about, what's being talked about and implied here as well in this reading, is the reality that God allows us to go deeper into darkness. So we experience it. And he said what ends up happening then is God draws back virtuous leadership. Righteous leadership, virtuous leadership on the earth. Think about the kind of leadership that's over the nations right now in so many places. It's staggering how bad it is, right? And how wicked some of it is. Even in the free countries, the kind of things we're talking about, that they're making priorities, deconstructing God's creative order as the way forward for the political community to somehow live in freedom. It's absolute madness. He also draws back the angels over nations that protect, which is why there's more lawlessness, disorder, violence in our streets, and chaos, because this is what we want. This God is drawing back the protection because people insist on the darkness. It's a slavery. It's a bondage. And then St. Bernardino goes on to say, then God removes the light of truth, right? The light of truth, which is God in Christ. Christ reveals the truth, and people start affirming lies, and they end up being destructive to their own being, which is what we're talking about here right now. Again, to deliver those who live through the fear of death and are subject to bondage their whole life long. The human race, apart from the grace of God, will always live at some degree under bondage to the fear of death, staving off death constantly and trying to do it by our own resources. So this is a great deception of the enemy. And when you come out of that protection, now he's going to have a way, he's going to have access to the human mind, to the human psyche, to the human spirit. Doesn't matter if you're rich and powerful, intelligent, whatever, he's more powerful than the most powerful person on the earth apart from Christ, right? Anyone who doesn't have Christ in their heart and walking in the light of God. Here's a commentary on this passage. It says, on a human level, Christ freed those who, through fear of death, had been subject to slavery all their life long. This statement conveys a profound psychological insight about the human condition. Most of us recognize that the fear of death can be a potent force in situations of physical danger and serious illness. But Hebrews is saying that the fear of death is an underlying force throughout all of human life. This is from Dr. Mary Healy. We instinctively resist and recoil from everything that reminds us of our mortality: pain, deprivation, weakness, criticism, failure. This paralyzing fear influences many human choices on a subconscious level, I'd say on a spiritual level. It leads to various forms of escapism and addiction, induces us to grasp the false security nets proffered by Satan, the kind of things that now is being proffered through governments, right? Behind this is demonic power. Hey, death is the solution to your problem. That's mercy. Yeah, you're a good person. In order for you to politically, to have to care for this political community, you need to lead in these areas and make sure that, abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, infanticide, that all these things are here so human beings can wield the power of death to secure their own freedom. Dr. Healy goes on. Again, this paralyzing fear influences many human choices on a subconscious level. It keeps us from pursuing the will of God with freedom, peace, and confidence. It is the slavery from which Jesus came to set us free. Again, when it lays hold of the mind, it's a power that people on just natural powers are literally powerless to fundamentally resist if they're not honestly opening their minds to natural law, to what God has revealed, to the truth of revelation, right? To walk in the light of truth. This is walking in darkness. And what the devil loves here is that he now lays hold of political communities to the way that he is able. And he seduces people into believing in their own goodness and their own designs and their own wisdom, right? And whatever's going to keep me reelected, what's going to make people happy, and then to act on it. And what does it end up doing? These political people usurp what belongs to God. God gives life and God takes it away. It's another expression of idolatry. It's just like we say, I will define what's a man, what's a woman. I will define, when life begins and when it doesn't begin. This is one thing after another, human beings usurping what belongs to God, God's prerogatives. We don't need God when we ourselves are God. Here's from the Catechism, paragraph 228. It is God who remains the sovereign master of life. We are obliged to accept life gratefully and preserve it for his honor and the salvation of our souls. We are stewards, not owners, of the life God has entrusted to us. It is not ours to dispose of. Paragraph 2258. Human life is sacred because from its beginning it involves the creative action of God, and it remains forever in a special relationship with the Creator, who is its sole end. God alone is the Lord of life, from its beginning until its end. No one can under any circumstance claim for himself or herself the right to directly to destroy an innocent human being. So it's not only usurping the authority that alone belongs to God, and we say, I'm God, right? You're also killing, you're destroying the image of God. Every creature belongs to God. It doesn't belong to you and doesn't even belong to themselves. I don't belong solely to myself. I belong to God. He made me. So what's happening, friends, is the devil leading people into false freedom. This is history. This is what happens. It's going to intensify before the Lord returns, but the devil's strategy, wherever he can, he'll lay hold of political systems that will, by force, put into place things that he deceives them into believing are good. And anybody who steps out, now watch what's going to happen. There's going to be an increase in the exercise of the power of political force to force people to submit to this stuff, to call good evil and evil good. It's already happening in our country. So the devil uses political power. The devil also uses seduction, right? False religion. Political power and false religion. False religion is growing. There's formerly Christian denominations that are basically sold out to the ideas that are emerging in the culture itself, in compromise. They're compromising, accommodating to the culture, and whatever the culture, whatever flags the culture's flying, they're flying. And now they're undermining revelation, they're undermining the teaching of Scripture. That's false religion that's emerging right here, even in formerly Christian communities, or some who are still battling with it, you could say. And so he deceives and he seduces. And friends, if we're not literally moving in the end times, I'm not saying that we are, this is an incredible dress rehearsal, an intense dress rehearsal for exactly what the Lord said in Matthew, in Luke, what's written in the book of Revelation, what the Holy Spirit has given to us to understand what's coming. And what we're called to do is to resist, is to be faithful witnesses. We're called to persevere. We're called to stand. We're called to live by the truth. This is a great test. The whole world is in this test. Throughout history it is, but it's very intense right now. And especially in the formerly Christian countries, which are now celebrating things that are profoundly offensive to God. The question is for you and me, are we going to stand? Are we going to be faithful? Are we going to bear witness when the time comes? Right? Are we going to persevere to the end, which Jesus exhorts us to, and the apostles exhort us to persevere in trial to the end? This is the path of Christ. It's the path the Christian people must walk. It's a great opportunity. Greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. There's nothing to be afraid of. But it's easy to get caught up into the lies of the world and what looks like unstoppable intimidation of the world to get filled with fear. Lay hold of the truth. Lay hold of the Word of God. Be on your knees before the Lord. The only safe place to be, friends, is to be in the Lord, in the Holy Spirit. He's with us. You were put on this earth now in order to be the Lord's witness to the end. so he can crown your life, so he can reward you, so he can bring you into the Father's house for all eternity. Life is very short. It's going to be over soon, friends. Let's make the most of every minute. So again, let me just see if there's any way, friends, that these YouTube videos have supported you. Please hit the subscribe button if you like them. Also go to our website at renewalministries.net. If you can financially support us, that's great. We want to continue to get the word out as much as we can. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.